I've given myself 100 days to change my life. And unfortunately, life does not stop lifing just because you decide to challenge yourself to participate more in it. I'm currently in the Lower Mainland, BC, tending to my grandmother's funeral arrangements and helping my dad clear out her home. Filming from an Airbnb before I head back to her apartment, it has been a very emotionally draining week. I have not been keeping up with my workouts like I had intended. And truth be told, I'm just too tired. Doing emotionally taxing things makes you physically tired. And it's definitely not something that people talk often enough about because we want to be focused on our health and we want to be focused on our boundaries and to make sure that we're eating and resting and doing all the things. But sometimes life requires more of you than you have available. One of the things that I've been really committed to is that I'm taking enough time for myself during the day to go for walks, to get my EFT done, because frankly, in the morning, I'm still emotionally exhausted from the day prior, that dropping into my practices is a little bit harder versus when I start getting going through the day around lunchtime, right after I've eaten, the perfect time to go for a digestive walk and just allow myself a little bit of breathing space. Listen, this week is so not conducive to this 100-day challenge, but it is what it is. There's nothing that I can do to change it or shift it. And frankly, that's okay too. After today, there are 88 days for me to continuously change my life. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not focused on my health. I'm just focused on my health in different ways. I'm more focused on my emotional health this week than I am on my physical. But obviously, they kind of go hand in hand. But simultaneously, when I can, I am still focused on my business somewhat. Today, I wrote a new post for the Money Laundry, my 6-month program where I give you the financial hygiene practices so that you can have the clean money you want, the filthy life you have, without sanitizing who you are for it. Because frankly, if there's anything that this week has taught me is that money is a conversation that you can never escape. Let me break this down for you. My grandmother moved to Vancouver when she was 20 years old with a 2-year-old. Trying to make her way alone in the city with very limited resources, she had to learn how to be extremely frugal. Me and her have our own complex relationship for sure, but to give you the extent of her frugality, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I would come to visit her during my summer break. At the time, I was very anti-eggs. The texture would make me gag. I didn't like the taste. I didn't like the flavor. My dad had tried numerous times, different styles, different ways, and just the texture gave me the ick. And if you've eaten eggs for a while, you know that egg ick is a thing. But when I was 7 or 8, it was hard. Now, my parents accepted that I wasn't eating eggs, but for my grandmother, she would not accept that. So instead, if I didn't eat the eggs she made me, they sat in the fridge to be reheated the next day because we could not waste an egg. Now, you might be thinking, oh my God, Steph, it's a really intense kind of thing to force a 7 to 8-year-old to do. And you would be right, but that's just who she was. So we're not going to assume that she's a bad person or anything like that. That's just the way that she thought. You can't waste food because wasting food is wasting money, which is only validated by the fact that we cleaned out her pantry and it is full of old canned goods that definitely expired because the cans were exploded. Now, that frugality had never escaped her. This is the woman who would travel the world but kept a log of every dollar spent. She spent more time logging the things that she was doing than she did really living them, from my perspective anyway. She had books upon books about investing and money, and honestly, it's what she was good at. But I would not trade my life for her relationship to money. In fact, her relationship to money and my father's relationship to money and the way that money was discussed my entire life is part of the reason why I didn't want to teach money anymore. I cannot seem to escape this conversation. I cannot seem to shift it because it's always a part of my life. Whether we're talking about inheritances or loans or paying for school. In fact, when I was 12 years old, it was her and her boyfriend that told me that there was no way I was going to be able to afford a Harvard education. And for a 12-year-old, that's enough force to have her drop her dreams. And so I did. While I told people I still had the desire to become a Harvard-educated lawyer, there was no part of me that believed I could do it. Versus prior to that, I was excited about the opportunity of discovering how. Maybe if I focused on my grades, I could get a scholarship and I would become a Harvard educated lawyer. But instead, my attention at 12 years old was put towards the fact that I was never going to be able to afford it. Kind of scary, don't you think? Setting 12 years old dreams on fire and then having them resign to whatever provides them a paycheck. This week has had me face so many different patterns, and I'm very aware of how inherited many of them have been. See, over the years, I have really excavated my relationship to money as it relates to my relationship to my dad. The fear of things being expensive was something that he had passed down to me, and I completely alchemized. I don't fear things being expensive because that's just their price. And it's either in my financial range or it's not. And that's okay. And if I can be okay with something being outside of my financial range, then I'm also okay with my financial range not being permanent. It can expand, it can contract, it can shift and evolve as I do. Just because something's expensive to me today, as in it's out of my financial range, doesn't mean that it won't be next week. It's a lot more fluid, a lot more spacious. And I'm glad and proud that I did that work. But I'm aware of so many more inherited patterns that are really confronting. The need to survive, the fear of things being taken away, the hiding of goodies and treats for ourselves because heaven forbid someone else sees them. Unfortunately, some of the patterns that I've become aware of have also expanded beyond money and more so about my relationship to authority. It came to light today that my grandmother had a pattern of always defaulting to the authority and never questioning and never using her own discernment, potentially because she might have actually lacked it. And then looking at my dad, who rebelled against authority, who finds safety in chaos because rigidity and structure are very unsafe because of his upbringing. And then looking at myself and saying, well, there is a balance between the two, which is one of the most uncomfortable poses. The extremes are easy to follow. But using our own discernment to blend those extremes into a much more homeostatic balance is complex. And that's what I intend to do with all of my work, is we find your balance so that you can be a sovereign participant in your life. And unfortunately, when you go through things in life and life keeps fucking lifing, you're going to find new things that you didn't have to address before. I never had to look at my own relationship to authority. I never had to look at my ways of rebelling or not rebelling, or my fear of speaking up for myself or not speaking up for myself. And now I do, because I have to see it. I see the consequences of constantly defaulting to someone who has the charisma and conviction of what they say, and then rebelling against it because you know that there's something distorted. In fact, if you go to the Eating Cake podcast, you'll see that there is a 1-hour masterclass where I was working with Amy Young, where I was teaching her audience that anything in saturation is toxic. And I'm seeing the very real reality of that teaching that I've always known. And here I am with more examples from my own actual lived life and the people within it. So while I'm not focused on my health in this 100-day challenge, I'm focused on 1,000 other things, and it's going to actively change my life as well. And you're here for the uncomfortable, pivot ain't pretty journey of discovering what's on the other side of that. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not saying that I need to go heal those things. It just means that I'm aware of things that I wasn't before, and I can either address them and move on, or they can sit there and simmer, stink up my life. Ultimately, the choice is mine, and I'm going to choose the one that's more helpful, relevant, and effective to get me where I want to be in life. Even if where I want to be is an unknown destination, and there's no way I could possibly preconceive what it could look like, but that's what I'm going to do. And so today, while we're still sifting through some of the items in the estate, I am going to take the afternoon off, and I've already talked to my dad to make sure that he's handled there to go tend to other things. I'll be headed into Burnaby to go see my grandparents on my mom's side, the cemetery. I'll be visiting a friend and her newborn, and I'll be visiting another friend who I haven't seen since pre-pandemic. In moments like this, sometimes our focus on our wellness is not just physical, it's more emotional, social, self-honoring. And I'm certainly going to need it for tomorrow when we go to her celebration of life and toss some flowers in the White Rock Pier. Have you been feeling like your money story isn't even yours, but you're still stuck repeating the same old inherited shit? Join Sugar Daddy, sweetening your inherited money stories. In this $98 masterclass, I'll show you how to ditch the generational limitations around money and wealth and finally be your own sugar daddy. You'll get instant access to the replay and a no BS community ready to support you as you break the cycle. If you're over the scarcity mindset, the limitations around who you can be and what you can accomplish, and finally ready to claim your wealth, let's do this. Head into the show description and grab it today.